blade, the tiller handle, the tiller head, the bolt that puts them all together, and you've also got the rope in there and the instruction manual and the cleat for the halyard and the parts bag. You want to make sure that you don't lose any of these small plastic caps. They may come off in the box, and you want to collect those from the box and put them on the spars. If you ever need to replace one of those, they've got parts like that for kitchen chair legs down at the hardware store. And this is the mast cap, the rope that raises the sail, the halyard, goes through that hole. And again, this is a small part that might come off and be loose in the box. Be careful to collect that as soon as you take delivery and keep track of it. Hi, I'm Jim Luckett, Sailboats to Go, and today we're going to assemble a brand new Snark that has just been delivered. So let's start with parts identification. We have here the hull, and certain parts have already been assembled to the hull, and that's standard. This is the gudgeon. The gudgeon is the hinge plate that accepts the rudder. And the mast seat has already been screwed to the hull, and in the mast seat is the mast sleeve, which is this aluminum tube that encases the mast on its trip from the mast seat down into the mast step that's molded into the styrofoam hull. So that's the hull assembly. Over here we've got the rudder head, the tiller, which is the handle by which you control the rudder, and the rudder blade, which is the fin that goes in the water and actually does the job of turning the boat. And we've got a bag of small parts. We've got a sail. We've got about 35 feet of rope. And this is the dagger board. The dagger board does the same job as a center board or lee board. It's a fin in the water that allows the boat to tack into the wind and sail across the wind. Without the dagger board inserted, the boat would just slide sideways on any point of sail other than straight downwind. And the dagger board slides into this slot here. It's meant to be tight so that the dagger board won't float up when you don't want it to. It may be really tight when you first get your boat and it'll work itself in. The dagger board slot has an aluminum casing inside it, and if you want to loosen up the fit, you just put a metal bar in there and wiggle it a little bit to spread that aluminum a little bit, and that would give you a looser fit on your dagger board if that's desired. Let's look inside the bag of small parts. We have a warranty card. Please fill that out, send it in. It's more than a warranty card, it's also the required registration of owners with the manufacturer in case there's ever any safety recall. If you need to register your boat with a state authority, Most states don't require that for a small sailboat, but if yours does, you can contact your retailer, hopefully that's Sailboats to Go, and ask for a manufacturer's statement of origin and a bill of sale that you can take to your state authorities to register your boat. Okay, let's take a look at the small parts and identify those. This is the rudder pin, and we'll see that in action a little later. This is the connecting bolt. You've got these two long poles that are going to be inside the sleeves of the sail, and they get bolted together and pivot on this bolt. This is the boom guide assembly. This is going to get bolted to the boom, and when you go sailing, you're going to insert your mast through the boom guide assembly and then on into the mast seat and mast sleeve that we saw a moment ago. This is the bow eye we're going to install in the very front of the boat so that if you want to tie a rope on at some point in the future, you can. This is a cleat that we're going to attach to the mast seat, and the purpose of this cleat is for tying off your halyard. The halyard is the rope you use to raise the sail, and once you've raised the sail and you're ready to go sailing, you tie it off to this cleat. This nut and bolt and washer are for assembling the rudder blade to the rudder head. We're going to do that in a minute. And this much smaller nut and bolt are for assembling the tiller to the rudder head. And these two small screws are for screwing the boom guide to the boom. Lastly, to complete the task of parts identification, we have these three long aluminum poles. And they come bound together. We're going to snip them apart now. One is larger diameter than the other two. That's the mast. And the mast has on one end a mast cap. Make sure you don't lose that. Might be a good idea to secure that with some duct tape or glue. And the mast cap has a hole in it, and your halyard rope is going to pass through that hole, and that will act like a pulley. The rope slides through that to raise the sail. This one is the boom, and I know it's the boom even though it looks very much like the third one because it has these two eye straps with nylon rings dangling from it. And the sheet, which is the rope that controls the angle of the sail, will pass through these nylon rings, and they will act like pulleys because it slides through them, and that's how you control the angle of the sail. So that's how we know it's the boom. The other way you can tell it's the boom is it has these two little holes pre-drilled for the boom guide that we mentioned before. That's going to screw right on there. This guy is called the top spar, or you could call it the gaff. And it's the same length as the boom. They're both 10 feet. If this were a sunflower, 3.3, then this guy would have an additional piece that's like 2.5 feet long that would slide onto the end because the sunflower has a larger sail. But this being a super snark, it's just at 10 feet, 10-foot one-piece top spar. And it has strap eyes on it. This strap eye is where you are going to tie on the halyard. The halyard, remember, is the rope that you raise the sail with. And this strap eye is just for tying on the little corner string at the peak of the sail. And the boom also has a strap eye out at the end. This one does double duty. You tie on that corner string. These spars, together the boom and top spar are also referred to as spars. So the boom and top spar have plastic caps on them, and they are more than just cosmetic. They serve a purpose. If you should ever drop one of these into the water, if the ends are capped, these should float because there'll be air inside and the water can't get inside. But if you don't have the caps on, the water will get inside and they will sink. So I think we've mentioned everything. Let's proceed with the assembly. And the first thing we're going to do is assemble the rudder blade to the rudder head. Notice that the rudder head has a smooth side and a very articulated side. The blade goes against the smooth side and the bolt goes in through this articulated side, and there's a square seat for it that matches up with the square shoulder underneath the head of the bolt. So put that bolt through and make sure it's seated square shoulder into square hole. Now, this point goes up, and this taper, this rounded foot on the rudder blade, goes like that. So that's the orientation of the rudder blade. And if you need help remembering that, just think of this boat sailing along and coming up and hitting the beach or hitting an obstruction under the water. You would want that rudder blade to kick up, and so you would want it to meet the angled side of the foot of the rudder blade. You wouldn't want it to be like that. Okay, we put the washer on and we put the nut on. And we tighten up the nut with a wrench. It's a nylon lock nut, so it resists tightening and it also resists loosening. And you'll need to live with that a little bit and decide how tight you want that nut to be. It needs to be tight enough so that that rudder blade isn't floating up on you all the time when you're sailing, but not so tight that you can't move the blade up if you want to have the boat on land with the rudder installed, or if it hits an obstruction under the water you want it to kick up, or if you are coming up on the beach you want it to kick up. So I'm going to tighten it just a little bit more. Okay, now we install the tiller to the rudder head. And I'm going to get the hammer and just tap that through gently. On the other side. Again, another nylon lock nut. You want to tighten it at least enough to engage the nylon lock ring. But you do want to let the tiller handle move. Because for your own comfort, sometimes you'll want to raise it and sometimes it'll be fully down. So there's our fully assembled rudder. And let's look at the rudder pin. The rudder pin has a cotter pin, so it's a pin with a pin. And that's to keep the rudder pin from falling out, even if you turn the boat upside down. Okay, now we got a boat that steers. Voila. Okay, let's cut there. Next we're going to install the bow eye. One washer goes outside, one washer goes inside. Poke it right through this hole. Once you get that coming through the other side now, right? Get this end action. Okay, that's done. Now we're going to put the sail on the spars. There's our beautiful sail, and you'll note that two edges of the sail have sleeves on them. The purpose of those sleeves is for the boom and top spar to slide into them. So let's grab the boom and let's identify which end is which. Okay, we know this is the back end, the aft end, because it's got one of these nylon ring dealies hanging from it. And so we want the front end. And the front end has these two pre-drilled holes for the boom guide in it. So we're going to go to the back of this sleeve, bottom of the sail. How do I know it's the bottom? It's got this cutout near the front. So the front is where the two sleeves almost meet. This cutout is for the boom guide. This is the front. This is the forward lower corner of the sail. And I'm going to put the boom into this sleeve, starting at the aft end. And I'm putting in first the end that's got the two pre-drilled holes, so that when I pushed it all the way through, these two pre-drilled holes will end up in that cutout that's near the front where the two sleeves meet. When I get to each cutout, the boom escapes, and I've got to feed it back in to the other end of the cutout. Okay, so the boom is now in the sail. The holes for the boom guide, U-shaped dealie, are here in this front cutout. One of these dangling rings is lined up with the cutout that's almost in the middle of the foot of the sail. And I can tie out the aft corner string to this eye. And we may have to adjust the position of the sail later, so that knot may get done again. Now I'm going to do the similar thing with the top spar. Again, I have to identify which end goes in first. And I'm going to start at the peak of the sail, and so the end that goes in first is the bottom end that has a hole for that connecting bolt that's going to bolt the top spar to the boom. So here's the peak of the sail, sliding the top spar into the sleeve, starting at the peak of the sail, sliding in the bottom end of the top spar. When it gets to the cutout, I've got to re-engage it with the sleeve at the other side of the cutout. And we've got this eye strap here that we can tie off the corner string to. But again, I may have to retie this to adjust the position of the sail. There's a final fine-tuning step at the end. Okay, now let's get our connecting bolt. And we can connect the two together. We want to make sure that the holes for the boom guide end up on the starboard side. The starboard side is the right side as you're facing forward in the boat. This is my right, this is the starboard side. We've got these holes facing the starboard side. Got two washers, one goes under the bolt head, one goes under the nut. And we'll tie this corner string loosely around the connecting bolt. adjust that later. Need to get my Phillips head screwdriver. And that doesn't need to be real tight, but you do need to tighten it enough to engage the locking ring that's part of that nylon locking bolt nut. So you want the end of the bolt to engage the nylon locking ring that's part of the nut. To position the sail on the spars before you do your final adjustment of these corner strings, what you want is for the weight of the boom. When the boom is being supported by the top spar, you want the weight of that boom to be to be supported by the back edge of the sail. You don't want the sail so far back on the spars that this front region of fabric is actually supporting the weight of the boom. So adjust it forward if that's happening so that the boom is supported by the back edge of the sail. Once you got the length right here, you would tighten the corner strings out at the aft end of the boom and the peak of the sail. Not super tight, but tight enough to get the wrinkles out in the sail sleeves. Once you've got the boom and top spars slid into the sleeves, before you put the connecting bolt in, spread out the sail like I've got it here, and get the orientation correct. Notice that we've got these rings on the bottom side of the boom, so that's the orientation you want for the boom. And we've got the strap eyes on the top spar pointing out. And the holes for the boom guide assembly are underneath here. So they're going to end up on the starboard side of the boat, the right side of the boat as you're facing forward. So that's all correct now. And I can put the connecting bolt in. One washer goes under the bolt head. One under there. I'm going to get the string started. Around the bolt. Let me go ahead and get that nut on so it doesn't slip out. There's a nylon locking nut, and we're going to make sure that the thread on the bolt is far enough in to engage that nylon locking ring. Now let's adjust the position of the sail and do the final tying on of the corner strings. We want the sail to be positioned on the boom and top spar so that the weight of the boom is going to be supported on the back edge, the back hem of the sail, and not by this fabric down here. If you have the sail too far back, then it's going to be too tight down here. Your corner strings go through the strap eye and around the top spar or boom. The strap eye is serving to locate the string, keeping it from sliding one way or the other. But you're actually tying around the spar. And that's particularly important with the halyard. We're going to be tying a long rope on here. And we want that rope to go around the top spar and not put all the strain on the little screws that attach this strap eye to the top spar. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tie out the other corner string. Okay, that's pretty good. The boom is being supported on the back hem. We still have a little bit of looseness here at the front, at the tack of the sail, this is called, but it's not super floppy either. So that's a good positioning of the sail on the spars. Now we can screw on the boom guide. Guide. We've done this screw. Now we're going to do the second screw, and if this doesn't quite line up with the hole, you just take pliers, swivel this out to the side, and you can give it a little crimp one way or the other to either open it or close it to the point where it will line up with that hole. Very good. So let's put on the halyard rope. You're given 35 feet of rope, and the idea is to cut it into 2 equal sections, and one half will become the halyard and the other half will become the sheet. So I've already done that and managed to create a tangle and demonstrate cutting and melting the end of a rope. So let me cut this nice melted end off. Now, so it doesn't fray, we're going to heat it with a flame. And be very careful. This melting nylon is incredibly hot and stays hot a surprisingly long period of time and can really burn your fingers. We don't want you to do that. So you get that nice and molten, and then we don't want a belled end. We want the end to be small so it'll fit through that hole in the mast cap. So I'm taking my pliers, not my fingertips, and I'm shaping that end into a nice point that will go through the mast cap. Okay. And we're almost done. We just need to put this cleat onto the, what do we call this, mast seat. And there's 2 pre-drilled holes. And just go in like that. Washers go underneath. Assembly is complete. Now let's take the boat outside. Sail on, raise it up. Am I going to carry it with the rudder on it? I guess I am. Mast and sail.
Battery's running low.
Let's rig our Snark. Get the halyard. Going to put it through the mast cap. We've got the boom and top spar and sail laying along the length of the boat with the boom guide on the starboard side. I put the mast through that boom guide and through the mast seat, mast sleeve, seated in the bottom of the boat. And we pull down on the halyard and up goes the sail. raise it all the way to the top. We want that knot at the top spar to be right up at the top of the mast so that we get the maximum headroom under the boom that we can have. And then we tie off the halyard to the cleat. And I like to loop it under the seat, let the seat take the strain directly rather than having the strain be all on the cleat, but you don't have to do that. And now we rig the sheet. We start by tying off the sheet. The sheet is this other half of your rope. The sheet ties to that eye strap on the base of the tiller handle. And then we feed it through the eye that's out here at the clew, the aft end of the boom, and then through the ring at the middle of the boom. We take up the slack, and this is what you hold in your hand. And that's how you adjust the position of the sail. And this sliding through rings kind of arrangement gives you a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage, and it also distributes the strain along the length of the boom and helps keep you from bending the boom in a strong wind. So, and let it out. That would be the sail position for running downwind. And there's your beam reach sail position, and there's your close haul sail position. You would never get the sail in further than about this, even for sailing close hauled into the wind. We forgot the dagger board. Where's the dagger board, Rob?
Right there.
Okay, we are not going to sail upwind or even across the wind without this, and that goes right in there. All the way down, but since we're on grass, we can't do it. That's it, assembling your Snark.